Chapter 1. The Christmas Agreement. Mike Stone had always believed that life was easier when you didn't overcomplicate it. That philosophy had carried him through 34 years, a surprise pregnancy, and the kind of relationship that defied neat labels. He wasn't married. He wasn't bitter. He wasn't lonely. At least not in the way people assumed when they saw him eating alone at a diner or walking through a grocery store with a cart that looked like it belonged to a man who lived off coffee and frozen meals. He had a son, Josh, 4 years old, with a laugh that could melt glaciers and a stubborn streak that came straight from his mother. Jenny Carmen, 34, like him, smart, funny, and still capable of making his chest tighten when she smiled. They weren't together, not in the romantic sense, but they weren't apart either. They were something that worked. On a gray December afternoon, Mike sat across from Jenny in his small apartment, nursing a mug of coffee while Josh built a tower of blocks on the rug. The scent of cinnamon drifted from the candle Jenny had lit when she walked in, because, as she put it, your place smells like a bachelor's tax return, sterile and vaguely depressing. Mike smirked at the memory and watched her now, curled up on the couch in a red sweater that made her hair look like spun gold. She was scrolling through her phone, probably checking the family group chat that exploded every December with plans for cookie swaps and caroling routes. Jenny's family did Christmas like it was an Olympic sport. Mike admired that about them. He wanted Josh to have that warmth, laughter, chaos, the kind of holiday every kid deserved. So, Jenny said, setting her phone aside, Mom wants to know if you're coming to Christmas Eve dinner. Mike shook his head. You know the deal. Josh spends Christmas with you and your family. That's non-negotiable. Her brow furrowed. You could come too, you know. It's not like anyone would mind. He smiled faintly. I'd mind. Jenny studied him for a moment, then sighed. You make it sound like we're enemies. We're not, Mike said quickly. We never were. No, she agreed softly. We weren't. Silence settled between them, broken only by Josh's triumphant shout as his tower wobbled but didn't fall. Mike grinned and gave him a thumbs up. The kid beamed like he'd just conquered Everest. Jenny leaned forward, elbows on her knees. You ever think about how weird this is? The way we do things. All the time, Mike admitted. But it works. Yeah, she said, a smile tugging at her lips. It does. They had rules, simple, rational rules. If either of them got serious about someone, and that someone was going to be around Josh, they'd meet first. No drama, no jealousy, just common sense. It was the kind of arrangement people envied when they heard about it, though Mike suspected most didn't believe it was real. But it was, because he and Jenny had never hated each other. They'd never played the blame game. They'd just chosen a different path. Mike sipped his coffee, letting the warmth chase away the chill that clung to his bones. Outside, snowflakes drifted past the window, lazy and delicate. Christmas lights blinked on balconies across the street, cheerful and bright. He wondered, not for the first time, what it would be like to spend Christmas with Jenny and Josh. To wake up to laughter and wrapping paper instead of silence and the hum of his refrigerator. But that wasn't his life. Couldn't be his life. Not with the secret he carried like a second skin. Jenny's voice pulled him back. You working Christmas Eve? Mike hesitated. Yeah. Long shift. She nodded, accepting the answer without pressing. She always did. Maybe that was why the guilt gnawed at him. She knew he was hiding something. He could see it in her eyes, but she didn't push. She trusted him enough to wait. And he didn't know how much longer he could make her wait. Josh barreled into his lap, giggling. Daddy. Tower fell. Mike laughed and ruffled his son's hair. Then we'll build another one, champ. Jenny watched them, her expression softening. For a moment, Mike let himself imagine a different world. One where secrets didn't matter. One where he could tell her everything. The snow globe in his closet. The portal to a realm of magic. The reindeer who thought he was God's gift to women. One where he could say, I love you, and not worry about what it would cost. But that world wasn't this one. And as Josh wriggled off his lap and ran back to his blocks, Mike shoved the thought aside. He had a job to do. Promise to keep, and a heart that was getting harder to ignore. Chapter 2. Behind the stable doors, Mike Stone had learned 2 things on his first day at the North Pole. 1, magic was real, and 2, magic had a sense of humor. He still remembered the interview like it had happened yesterday. A snowstorm had swallowed the world outside, and he trudged through it thinking he was headed to a quirky seasonal gig at a luxury ranch. The ad had been vague. Stablemaster needed. Must love animals. Competitive pay. He'd laughed at the must love animals part. He'd grown up around horses. He could handle a few temperamental stallions. What he couldn't handle, or hadn't expected, was Santa Claus leaning back in a chair like a man who owned the world, grinning as if he'd just heard the punchline to a cosmic joke. Can you keep a secret without hurting anyone? Santa had asked, his voice warm and deep, like a crackling fire. Mike, still convinced this was some elaborate prank, had shrugged. Sure. That's the interview, Santa said cheerfully. You're hired. Mike had blinked. Wait, what? Santa's grin widened. You'll figure it out. And he had, sort of. The moment Rudolph snorted and said, nice suit, cowboy. Did you wrestle that off a mannequin? Mike realized two things. One, the reindeer talked, and two, he was in way over his head. Now, 2 years later, Mike stood in the stablemaster's cottage, tugging on his heavy coat as the wind howled outside. The North Pole wasn't just cold. It was a living, breathing winter wonderland, a parallel plane of existence shimmering with enchantment. Snowflakes danced like tiny ballerinas, wreaths sang carols in perfect harmony, and gingerbread men strutted around with the confidence of runway models. It was absurd. It was beautiful. It was home, at least for part of the year. Mike pushed open the stable doors, and the familiar scent of hay and peppermint hit him. The reindeer were lined up in their stalls, antlers gleaming under strings of twinkling lights. Comet was humming a jazz tune. Donner was reading a paperback titled Elf Help for Stress. And Rudolph, of course, was leaning against his stall like a lounge singer, his nose glowing faintly as he eyed Mike with mock seriousness. "Stone," Rudolph drawled. "You're late. Again. Women don't like tardy men, you know?" Mike groaned. "Morning to you too, Rudy." "Morning? It's practically brunch. If you had a girlfriend, she'd have dumped you by now." Mike shot him a look. "Good thing I don't." Rudolph's nose pulsed brighter. "Tragic. You've got the jawline, the brooding vibe. All wasted on solitude. You need a plan, my man. A strategy. Lucky for you, I'm the reindeer of romance." "The reindeer of what now?" "Romance," Rudolph said, puffing out his chest. "Ladies love a guy with a glow. Trust me." Mike chuckled and moved down the row, checking feed buckets. "Pretty sure it's the nose, Rudy. Jealousy is an ugly color, Stone." Mike shook his head, smiling despite himself. This was his life now, bantering with a reindeer who thought he was Casanova. And honestly, it wasn't bad. The work was hard, but the magic made up for it. The stables weren't just barns. They were sanctuaries of wonder. Each stall shimmered faintly, a protective spell woven into the wood. The air was crisp but never biting, and the hay smelled faintly of sugar cookies. Even the water troughs sparkled like liquid crystal. Mike ran a hand over Blitzen's neck, feeling the warmth beneath the fur. "Big night coming up," he murmured. Blitzen snorted. "We were born ready." Mike smiled. Christmas Eve was their Super Bowl. The reindeer trained all year for that one night, and Mike made sure they were in peak condition. It was more than a job, it was a calling. One he couldn't share with anyone. Not Jenny. Not Josh. No one. And that was the problem. Later, in the cottage, Mike sat at the small wooden desk, staring at the snow globe tucked in the corner. His portal. His secret. A perfect sphere of glass, swirling with endless snow. All it took was a touch and you were whisked away naked because apparently elves didn't trust human technology. He'd learned that the hard way. He thought about Jenny. About her laugh, her stubbornness. The way she looked at him like she could see past every wall he built. He wanted to tell her. God, he wanted to tell her. But what if she thought he was insane? What if she hated him for lying? What if Santa had rules about this, rules Mike had never asked about because he was afraid of the answer? He rubbed a hand over his face. 2 years of secrets, 2 years of half-truths. And now, with Christmas around the corner, the weight of it felt heavier than ever. Outside, the wind howled, carrying the sound of distant laughter. Elves rehearsing for the annual flash dance Santa insisted on. Mike smiled faintly. Santa had a dark sense of humor and a flair for spectacle. He'd probably love the idea of Mike confessing everything in the middle of a choreographed routine. Mike's phone buzzed. A text from Jenny. "Josh wants to know if you'll help him build a snowman this weekend." Mike stared at the screen, his chest tightening. He typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." And as he hit send, he made himself a promise. A dangerous, reckless promise. Soon. He'd tell her soon. Chapter 3. The Vanishing Act. Saturday afternoons were sacred. Mike had carved them out like holy ground. No work, no distractions, just time with Josh and Jenny. It was the one thing he refused to compromise on, even when the North Pole schedule pressed hard against his real-world life. His apartment smelled faintly of grilled cheese and tomato soup, the kind of comfort food that made Josh clap his hands and declare, "Best lunch ever." Jenny laughed, shaking her head as she wiped a smear of soup from her son's chin. "You say that every time," she teased. Josh grinned, cheeks flushed with warmth. "Because it's true." Mike leaned against the counter, watching them with a smile that felt too big for his face. These were the moments he lived for, the ordinary ones. No magic, no secrets, just laughter and crumbs on the table. Jenny glanced up, catching his gaze. For a heartbeat, something flickered between them. Something old, something dangerous. Mike looked away first, clearing his throat. "So," he said, reaching for neutral ground, "you ready for the Christmas marathon? Your family's got, what, 3 parties lined up?" 4, Jenny corrected, rolling her eyes. "And yes, I'm ready. Mostly." "Mostly," she shrugged. "It's a lot. But Josh loves it. And that's what matters." Mike nodded, his chest tightening. He wanted to say, "I love it too. I love seeing him happy. I love seeing you happy." But the words stayed locked behind his teeth. Josh, oblivious to the adult tension, hopped off his chair and announced, "I'm gonna build a tower in Daddy's room." Mike chuckled. "Go for it, champ." Just don't knock over my closet door. Josh saluted dramatically and dashed down the hall. Jenny smiled, shaking her head. He's got your energy. God help us, Mike muttered, grinning. They fell into easy conversation, school updates, holiday plans, the logistics of gift exchanges. It was normal, comfortable, until the silence stretched too long. Mike frowned. He's quiet. Jenny glanced toward the hallway. Probably concentrating. Or plotting, Mike said, half joking. But unease prickled at the back of his neck. Josh was a whirlwind of noise. Quiet meant trouble. He pushed away from the counter. I'll check. The hallway was dim, the hum of the heater filling the space. Mike stepped into his bedroom, expecting to find Josh surrounded by blocks. Instead, he found the closet door ajar. His stomach dropped. It shouldn't have been open. It was always locked. Always. Mike crossed the room in 3 strides, heart pounding. The door creaked as he pushed it wider, and the sight that greeted him turned his blood to ice. Josh's clothes lay crumpled on the floor. No, Mike whispered, panic clawing at his throat. He knelt, fingers trembling as he touched the tiny shirt, the socks still warm. His gaze lifted to the shelf. The snow globe sat there, swirling with endless flakes, glowing faintly like it was laughing at him. Josh had touched it. Josh was gone. Mike's mind raced. He could go after him, grab the globe, teleport straight to the reception hall. But Jenny would come looking. She'd find both of them gone. And then what? How did you explain this? Footsteps sounded behind him. Jenny's voice, casual at first. Everything okay? Mike froze. His pulse roared in his ears. He turned slowly, schooling his face into something that wasn't sheer terror. Jenny stood in the doorway, brows knitting as she took in the scene. The open closet, the clothes on the floor. Mike crouched like a man who just lost everything. Mike, she said, her voice sharpening. Where's Josh? He opened his mouth, closed it. The truth pressed against his teeth like a flood. His throat worked. Jenny, there's something I need to tell you. Her eyes narrowed. What did you do? Nothing, he said quickly. He's safe. I swear he's safe. Safe. Her voice cracked. He's 4 years old, Mike. Where is he? Mike swallowed hard. This was it. The moment he dreaded for 2 years. No more lies. No more half-truths. He stood, heart hammering, and said the words that would change everything. He's at the North Pole. Jenny blinked. What? The North Pole? Mike repeated, voice steady now because there was no turning back. It's real. Magic is real. And I work there. Silence. Heavy. Disbelieving. Jenny stared at him like he'd grown antlers. You're joking. I'm not. He reached for the snow globe, holding it out like proof. This is how I get there. It's a portal. Josh must have touched it. Jenny's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her gaze flicked to the globe, then back to him. Mike, if this is some kind of... It's not, he said, urgent now. He's fine. Safer than anywhere else on Earth. But we need to go. Now. Jenny hesitated, fear and confusion warring in her eyes. Go where? Mike extended his hand. With me. To get our son. Chapter 4. The big reveal. Jenny Carmen had always considered herself a rational woman. She believed in things she could see, touch, measure. Magic belonged in bedtime stories and holiday movies, not in her real life. So when Mike held out a snow globe and said their son was at the North Pole, her first instinct was to laugh. Except Mike wasn't laughing. His eyes were steady, his jaw tight, and his voice carried a weight that made her stomach twist. He believes this, she thought. He really believes this. Mike, she said slowly. If this is some kind of joke. It's not. He cut in, urgent now. Jenny, I swear to you, Josh is safe. But we need to go. Right now. She stared at the globe. It was beautiful glass swirling with endless flakes. A tiny cottage nestled among candy cane trees. Innocent. Ordinary. Except for the faint glow pulsing at its core. Like a heartbeat. Jenny swallowed hard. You're telling me that thing is a portal? Yes. And Josh touched it? Yes. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Mike, do you hear yourself? I do, he said quietly. And I know how it sounds. But I'm not lying to you, Jenny. I've never lied about anything that mattered. She wanted to argue. She wanted to demand proof, call him crazy, grab her son and run. But her son wasn't here. Her son was, if Mike was telling the truth, in a place that shouldn't exist. Jenny's voice cracked. If you're wrong. I'm not, Mike said, and something in his tone, steady, fierce, made her believe him despite every shred of logic screaming otherwise. He extended his hand. Come with me. Jenny hesitated, fear clawing at her ribs. Then she thought of Josh. His laugh, his tiny hands, the way he'd whispered snowman like it was the most important word in the world. She couldn't waste time doubting. Not if there was even a chance Mike was right. She took his hand. The moment her fingers closed around his, Mike touched the globe. Light exploded, white, blinding, pure, and the world vanished. Jenny gasped, weightless, as if she'd been plucked from reality and hurled into a dream. Cold air kissed her skin, sharp and sweet, and then she was standing, barefoot, shivering. in a room that looked like something out of a storybook. The reception hall was vast and gleaming, its walls carved from ice that shimmered like diamonds. A table stood in the center, stacked with neatly folded uniforms, scarlet coats, fur-lined boots, mittens that sparkled faintly. And beside the table, grinning like they'd been waiting for this moment all year, were 3 elves, actual elves. Jenny's breath caught. They were tiny, no taller than her waist, with pointed ears and rosy cheeks, dressed in green tunics and striped stockings. One had a clipboard. Another wore glasses perched on the tip of a button nose. The third waved cheerfully, jingling bells sewn into their hat. "Welcome," the waving elf chirped. "New arrivals. Oh, we love new arrivals." Jenny stared, words failing her. Mike squeezed her hand gently. "Jenny," he said, voice low, "breathe." She dragged in air, her mind spinning. What is this?" "The North Pole," Mike said simply. "The real one." Jenny turned in a slow circle, taking in the glittering walls, the distant hum of music, the faint scent of peppermint. It was impossible. It was insane. And yet, it was here. Solid. Real. The elf with the clipboard cleared their throat. "Names?" "Mike Stone," Mike said. "And Jenny Carmen." "Lovely," the elf said, scribbling. "And the little one?" "Joshua. He's already been processed. Charming boy. Excellent questions. Currently touring the gingerbread district." Jenny blinked. "They what?" "Gingerbread district," the elf repeated cheerfully. "Very popular with newcomers. Sentient cookies, singing candy canes, the works." Jenny swayed, gripping Mike's arm. "He's okay?" "He's fine," Mike assured her. "Better than fine. He's probably having the time of his life." Jenny stared at him, 1,000 questions clawing at her throat. "Mike, what is this? How long have you—" "Later," he said gently. "I'll explain everything. But first, we need clothes." Jenny glanced down and froze. She was naked. A strangled sound escaped her throat. "Mike!" He winced. "Yeah, the portal strips everything. Security measure. No tech allowed." Jenny gaped at him. "You could have warned me. I was a little busy convincing you magic exists," he said, trying and failing not to smile. She smacked his arm, cheeks flaming, and snatched the nearest uniform from the table. "Turn around." Mike obeyed, grinning despite the chaos. Because somehow, in the middle of the impossible, Jenny was here. With him. And for the first time in years, hope didn't feel like a fantasy. Chapter 5. Welcome to the North Pole. Jenny Carmen had never believed in magic. Not really. Sure, she'd watched the movies, read the stories, even played along when Josh wrote letters to Santa. But deep down, she'd always known it was make-believe. A sweet illusion to keep childhood bright. Until now. Because now she was standing in a world that shouldn't exist. The moment she stepped out of the reception hall, Jenny's breath caught. The North Pole wasn't just snow and ice. It was color and light and sound. A living tapestry of wonder. Candy cane lampposts lined cobblestone streets dusted with glittering frost. Gingerbread cottages leaned cheerfully against one another, their roofs dripping icing like frozen waterfalls. Strings of golden lights crisscrossed the sky, glowing against an aurora that shimmered in hues of green and violet. And everywhere, there were elves, laughing, singing, darting between shops with trays of steaming cocoa. A group of them practiced a choreographed dance in the square, their bells jingling in perfect rhythm. Nearby, a gingerbread man strutted past with a peppermint cane slung over his shoulder, whistling a tune Jenny couldn't place. Jenny stared, her mouth dry. This is insane," Mike offered, grinning. "Beautiful," she whispered, because it was. Impossible and breathtaking and so far beyond anything she'd ever imagined. Mike's smile softened. "Come on, let's find Josh." They wove through the bustling streets, Jenny clutching Mike's arm like a lifeline. Every turn revealed something new. A choir of wreaths harmonizing carols, a snowman barista serving lattes with whipped cream hats, a sleigh-shaped tram gliding silently along tracks of pure ice. Jenny felt like she'd fallen into a dream, and part of her was terrified she'd wake up. "Mike," she said finally, her voice low. "How long have you been part of this?" 2 years, he said. "I'm the stablemaster." Jenny blinked. "Stablemaster. For Santa's reindeer." She stopped dead. "You're telling me Santa Claus is real?" Mike turned to face her, his expression calm, almost amused. "You're standing in his front yard." Jenny opened her mouth, closed it, and shook her head. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Mike said gently. "Just trust me." She looked at him, then really looked, and saw the truth in his eyes. The weight he'd carried, the walls he'd built, all of it made sense now. He hadn't been hiding something ugly. He'd been protecting something extraordinary. Before she could speak, a voice rang out behind them, smooth, confident, and dripping with charm. Well, if it isn't Stone bringing a lady to the pole." Jenny turned and froze. It was a reindeer, a massive, antlered reindeer with a coat like burnished bronze and a nose that glowed faintly red. He leaned against a candy cane post like he owned the place, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Rudolph, Mike muttered, sounding like a man bracing for impact. The one and only, the reindeer said, his voice rich and velvety. He winked at Jenny. And who might this vision of holiday cheer be? Jenny gaped. You talk. Of course I talk, Rudolph said, tossing his head. What do I look like, a common caribou? Jenny blinked. I don't. Don't worry, sweetheart, Rudolph said smoothly. You'll get used to it. Most women do. Mike groaned. Rudy. What? Rudolph said innocently. I'm just saying, Stone, you've been holding out on us. She's gorgeous. Smart eyes, great posture. And she's here with you. That means something. Jenny's cheeks flamed. Relax, Rudolph said, grinning. I'm the reindeer of romance. If you need tips, Stone, I've got you covered. Mike pinched the bridge of his nose. God help me. First tip, Rudolph continued, ignoring him. Confidence. Women love confidence. Second tip, mistletoe. Strategic placement. Third tip, don't wear that coat. It makes you look like a lumberjack who lost his axe. Jenny laughed. Actually laughed. And the sound hit Mike like sunlight breaking through clouds. He hadn't heard that laugh in years. Not like this. Warm. Unrestrained. Beautiful. Come on, Mike said quickly, before Rudolph could launch into a dissertation on candlelight dinners. Josh first. Dating advice later. Suit yourself, Rudolph called after them. But don't say I didn't warn you. Mistletoe works wonders. Jenny shook her head, still smiling as they walked on. He's unbelievable. Mike sighed. You have no idea. They found Josh in the gingerbread district, perched on a bench between two sentient cookies who were teaching him how to whistle through a candy cane. His cheeks were pink, his eyes bright, and when he saw Jenny, he squealed and launched himself into her arms. Mommy, this place is amazing. Jenny hugged him tight, tears stinging her eyes. I bet it is, baby. Josh wriggled free, bouncing on his toes. There's singing wreaths and dancing elves and a snowman who makes cocoa and… Mommy, can we stay forever? Jenny laughed, her heart aching with relief and wonder. We'll see, sweetheart. Mike watched them, something tender and fierce burning in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt like maybe, just maybe, this wasn't impossible. Maybe he could have this, them, family, if he was brave enough to try. Chapter 6. Santa's Dark Humor. Jenny had barely wrapped her head around talking reindeer and sentient cookies when Mike led her and Josh toward the largest building in sight, a towering structure of carved ice and candy-striped columns, crowned with a roof that glittered like sugared snow. It looked like a palace designed by a child with an unlimited frosting budget. Where are we going? Jenny asked, still clutching Josh's hand like he might float away. To meet the boss, Mike said, his tone dry. He'll want to say hello. Jenny blinked. The boss. Mike gave her a look. Santa. Jenny stopped dead. Santa Claus. Mike's lips twitched. You were expecting middle management? Josh gasped, eyes wide as saucers. Santa. Mommy, we're gonna meet Santa. Jenny opened her mouth to protest, to say this was too much, too fast, but Josh was already tugging her forward, his excitement a tidal wave she couldn't fight. And honestly, she wasn't sure she wanted to. Because if this was real, and every impossible thing she'd seen screamed that it was, then meeting Santa was the least shocking part of the day. The doors swung open with a soft chime, and Jenny stepped into a hall that stole her breath. It was vast, glowing with warm golden light, its walls lined with shelves of toys that stretched higher than she could see. A fire crackled in a hearth big enough to roast an ox, and above it hung a wreath the size of a car, humming a gentle carol in perfect pitch. And in the center of it all, lounging in a chair carved from ice and trimmed with velvet, was Santa Claus. He was nothing like the cartoonish image Jenny had carried all her life. Yes, he had the beard white and full, like fresh snow, and the red suit, rich and regal. But his eyes were sharp, bright, and glinted with something that made Jenny's pulse skip. Humor, mischief, a spark that said he knew every secret in the room and was enjoying all of them. Well, Santa said, his voice deep and warm, curling through the air like smoke. Mike Stone, breaking protocol. And here I thought you were my most reliable man. Mike winced. Sir. Relax, Santa said, waving a hand. I'm not mad. I'm delighted. Drama is good for morale. Jenny blinked. Drama? Santa's grin widened. You have no idea how boring it gets up here without a little chaos. Elves dancing, reindeer flirting, gingerbread union strikes. Oh, the usual. But this. He gestured between Mike and Jenny. This is juicy. Jenny flushed. Juicy. Don't mind him, Mike muttered. He thinks he's funny. I am funny, Santa said cheerfully. Dark humor, mostly. Keeps the centuries interesting. Josh barreled forward, his awe radiating like sunlight. Santa, you're real. Santa leaned down, his smile softening. Of course I'm real, Joshua. And I hear you've been very curious today. Josh nodded vigorously. This place is amazing. Can we stay forever? Santa chuckled, ruffling his hair. Tempting, isn't it? But your mom might have opinions. Jenny found her voice barely. I don't even know what this is. It's magic, Santa said simply. The kind that makes life worth living. Jenny swallowed hard, her gaze flicking to Mike. He stood stiffly, hands shoved in his pockets, like a man waiting for judgment. And suddenly, Jenny understood. This was why he'd been distant, why he'd kept walls around his life. He wasn't hiding something shameful. He was guarding something extraordinary. Santa's eyes gleamed as he followed her gaze. You know, he said casually, Mike's been my best stablemaster in decades. Loyal, hardworking, terrible at expressing feelings, but we can't all be perfect. Mike groaned. Sir. What? Santa said innocently. I'm just saying, Jenny, he's a good man. A little broody, but that's a selling point these days. Jenny's cheeks burned. Think about it, Santa said, winking. Christmas is about miracles. And sometimes, the biggest miracle is letting yourself be happy. Jenny stared at him, words tangled in her throat. Because deep down, beneath the shock, the disbelief, the whirlwind of magic, she knew he was right. As they left the hall, Josh chattering about toys and sleigh rides, Jenny walked in silence, her thoughts a storm. Mike glanced at her, his jaw tight. You okay? He asked softly. Jenny looked at him, really looked, and felt something shift. Something old and familiar. Something she'd buried under years of practicality and fear. I don't know, she admitted. But I want to be. Mike's breath caught, hope flickering in his eyes like the lights overhead. And for the first time in years, Jenny didn't look away. Chapter 7. A sleigh ride and a confession. The aurora shimmered like liquid emerald across the velvet sky, ribbons of green and violet twisting above the snow-draped world. Jenny sat in the sleigh, her breath curling in the crisp air, her heart pounding like the hooves of the reindeer pulling them forward. Beside her, Mike held the reins with practiced ease, his profile etched in silver by the moonlight. Josh was nestled between them, bundled in a fur-lined coat, his laughter ringing out as the sleigh soared over rooftops dusted with sugar snow. Higher, Daddy, higher. Mike grinned, flicking the reins lightly. The reindeer responded with a surge of power, antlers gleaming as they leapt into the open sky. Jenny clutched the edge of the sleigh, exhilaration and terror tangling in her chest. This is insane, she whispered, wind whipping her hair. Mike glanced at her, his smile softening. It's magic. Jenny met his gaze, and for a moment the world narrowed to the space between them. The aurora danced, the bells jingled, and her breath caught because she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen in years. Something raw, something real. Josh squealed as the sleigh dipped, his joy a bright spark against the night. Jenny laughed, the sound torn from her like a secret, and Mike's chest tightened. God, he'd missed that laugh. When they landed on a ridge overlooking the glowing village, Josh scrambled out to make snow angels, his giggles echoing in the stillness. Mike helped Jenny down, his hand warm against hers, lingering just a fraction too long. She felt it, the weight of his touch, the heat beneath the cold, and her pulse stuttered. Mike, he swallowed hard, his breath misting in the air. Jenny, I need to say something. Her heart thudded. What? He looked at her then, really looked, and the walls he'd built for years cracked wide open. I love you. The words hung between them, fragile and fierce, shimmering like frost in moonlight. Jenny stared, her throat tight, her mind a storm of memories, late-night talks, shared laughter. The way he'd always shown up for Josh. For her, even when he couldn't explain why he kept his distance. Mike, her voice trembled. You can't just, I can, he said, stepping closer. I should have said it years ago. I didn't because I thought this job, this secret, made it impossible. But seeing you here, seeing Josh here, I don't care about impossible anymore. Jenny's breath hitched. She wanted to speak, to tell him everything she felt. Fear, longing, hope, but the words tangled. Because she loved him too. She always had. But love wasn't simple. Love was risk. And this was a world built on magic and secrets. Mike reached for her hand, his voice low, steady. I'm not asking for forever tonight. I'm asking for a chance to make this right. Jenny stared at him, the aurora painting his face in hues of green and gold, and something inside her shifted. Maybe Santa was right. Maybe Christmas was about miracles. And maybe, just maybe, this was hers. She squeezed his hand, her lips curving in a smile that felt like sunlight breaking through snow. A chance, she whispered. Okay. Mike's breath left him in a rush, relief and joy colliding in his chest. He wanted to kiss her. God, he wanted to. But Josh's voice rang out behind them, bright and oblivious. Mommy, Daddy, look, my snow angel has antlers. Jenny laughed and Mike laughed too because of course it did. This was the North Pole, and nothing here was ordinary. Chapter 8. Rudolph's dating tips and elf flash dance. The North Pole had a rhythm, a constant hum of cheer and chaos, and tonight, it was louder than ever. Jenny stood in the village square, snowflakes swirling like confetti as elves darted past with mysterious bundles and mischievous grins. Josh was in the thick of it, wearing a hat with jingling bells and helping a gingerbread man carry a tray of cocoa mugs that looked suspiciously unstable. Mike hovered nearby, his eyes flicking between Jenny and Josh like a man trying to keep two worlds from colliding. Jenny noticed and smiled. He was protective, always had been, but here, in this impossible place, he seemed lighter, freer, and maybe happier. "Stone!" A voice boomed, smooth as velvet and twice as smug. Jenny turned and groaned inwardly. Rudolph was striding toward them, antlers gleaming under the aurora, nose glowing like a neon sign advertising trouble. He stopped in front of Mike, puffing out his chest like a reindeer who just won a beauty pageant. "Big night coming up," Rudolph said, his tone dripping with faux gravity. "Christmas Eve, the sleigh, the magic, and..." He leaned closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "The mistletoe." Mike sighed. "Rudy. Don't Rudy me," Rudolph said, wagging his head. "You've got a woman here, Stone. A gorgeous, smart, human woman who clearly likes you. Don't even try to deny it. I've got eyes sharper than Cupid's arrows. And what do? You stand around like a snowman waiting for spring." Jenny choked on a laugh. Mike shot her a look that said don't encourage him, which only made her laugh harder. "Here's the deal," Rudolph continued, ignoring Mike's glare. "Romance is like a sleigh ride. You gotta lean in, steer with confidence, and for the love of Coco, don't forget the bells." Mike pinched the bridge of his nose. "Why do I let you talk?" "Because deep down you know I'm right," Rudolph said smugly. "Now, tip number 1, find mistletoe. Tip number 2, use mistletoe. Tip number 3, don't wear that coat. Seriously, Stone, you look like a lumberjack who lost his axe." Jenny laughed so hard she had to clutch the edge of a candy cane bench. "Oh my God." Mike muttered something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like "I hate my life," but Jenny saw the corner of his mouth twitch. He was fighting a smile. And losing. Before Rudolph could launch into a lecture on candlelight dinners, a trumpet blared from the center of the square. Elves poured in from every direction, forming neat rows with military precision, except for the jingling hats and candy-striped tights, which made them look more like a marching band designed by a sugar-crazed toddler. "What's happening?" Jenny asked, breathless. "Flash dance," Mike said grimly. "Santa's idea." The music exploded, jazzy, bright, impossible not to move to, and suddenly, the elves were dancing. High kicks, spins, synchronized jingles. A gingerbread man joined in, twirling like a Broadway star, while a snowman breakdanced in the background. Rudolph pranced to the beat, tossing his antlers like he was auditioning for a music video. Jenny doubled over laughing, tears streaming down her cheeks. This is insane." Mike grinned, watching her laugh like he hadn't seen in years. And in that moment, amid the chaos, the music, the magic, he felt something settle deep in his chest. This was what he wanted. Her laughter, Josh's joy, a life where impossible things weren't barriers but bridges. Jenny caught his gaze, her smile softening, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just them. The music faded, the lights blurred, and Mike thought, maybe tonight, I'll find that mistletoe. Chapter 9, Christmas Eve Chaos. The North Pole was a symphony of motion. Sleigh bells chimed like a countdown. Elves zipped through the air on peppermint hoverboards, and the scent of gingerbread mingled with the sharp sweetness of frost. It was Christmas Eve, the Super Bowl of magic, and Mike Stone was in the eye of the storm. Jenny stood near the stables, watching in wide-eyed wonder as reindeer pranced in formation, antlers glittering with enchanted frost. Josh was somewhere in the chaos, last seen wearing an elf hat 3 sizes too big and carrying a wrench he had no business holding. "Mike," Jenny called over the din. "Are you sure he's safe?" Mike jogged past, hauling a crate of enchanted harnesses. "Define safe." Jenny's brows shot up. "That's not reassuring." "He's with the elves," Mike said, breathless. "They're professionals." As if on cue, a shriek split the air. Jenny spun to see Josh dangling from a candy cane pulley system, grinning like he'd just discovered gravity was optional. 2 elves zipped around him, shouting instructions that sounded suspiciously like, "More sparkle." Jenny's heart leapt into her throat. "Mike, I've got it." Mike dropped the crate and sprinted toward the pulley, barking orders that somehow translated into the elves saluting and releasing Josh gently onto a pile of marshmallows. Josh popped up, laughing, his hat askew. "Mommy, I was flying." Jenny pressed a hand to her chest, torn between terror and awe. "You were something." Mike crouched beside Josh, ruffling his hair. "Buddy, maybe stick to ground level for now." Josh pouted. But Rudolph said, "Of course he did," Mike muttered darkly. As if summoned by his own reputation, Rudolph trotted into view, antlers gleaming like polished gold. His nose glowed brighter than usual, a sure sign he was feeling smug. "Stone," Rudolph said, voice smooth as cocoa. "You're welcome." Mike glared. "For what?" "For inspiring the boy," Rudolph said, tossing his head. "Confidence starts young." Jenny crossed her arms, fighting a smile. "You're incorrigible." "Thank you," Rudolph said, bowing slightly. "Now, speaking of confidence, have you found that mistletoe yet?" Mike groaned. "Rudy, Don't Rudy me, Rudolph said, stepping closer. This is your moment, Stone. The aurora's blazing, the cocoa's flowing, and the lady, he winked at Jenny, is clearly enchanted. Jenny's cheeks warmed. Not helping, Mike snapped. Helping is my middle name, Rudolph said proudly. Well, technically it's Dasher, but that's a long story. Jenny laughed, and Mike's irritation melted like snow under sunlight. Her laughter, God, he'd chased that sound to the ends of the earth, or the pole. The chaos crescendoed as elves launched into final preparations. Sleigh bells rang, harnesses shimmered, and Santa's booming voice echoed from the workshop. Places? Everyone. We've got a world to dazzle. Mike turned to Jenny, his pulse hammering. This was it, the moment he'd been waiting for, the moment Rudolph wouldn't shut up about. He stepped closer, the glow of the aurora painting her face in hues of green and gold. Jenny, he began, voice low, steady. About what I said earlier. A crash interrupted him. They both spun to see Josh tumbling out of a barrel of enchanted glitter, sparkling like a disco ball. Elves cheered. Rudolph whistled. Jenny laughed so hard she doubled over, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mike sighed, half exasperated, half grateful. Because if there was one thing he'd learned tonight, it was this: life didn't wait for perfect moments. It gave you chaos, magic, and laughter, and dared you to make something beautiful out of it. And maybe, just maybe, he would. Chapter 10. The Gift of Truth. The North Pole had quiet moments. Rare, fleeting, like snowflakes that melted the instant they touched your skin. Tonight, after the chaos of sleigh prep and elf acrobatics, Mike found one. Jenny stood beneath an arch of frosted holly, the aurora spilling green fire across the sky. The village hummed in the distance, laughter and bells fading into a soft lull. Josh was asleep in the cottage, curled up under a quilt stitched with candy cane stripes, his dreams no doubt full of flying reindeer and gingerbread adventures. Mike approached slowly, his boots crunching on the snow. Jenny turned, her breath misting in the cold, and for a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it was heavy with everything unsaid. You found mistletoe, Jenny said finally, her voice low, teasing. Mike glanced up. Sure enough, a sprig dangled above them, its berries glowing faintly like embers. He huffed a laugh. Rudolph's handiwork. Jenny smiled, and the sight of it hit him like a sleigh at full speed. He'd seen her smile 1,000 times, but here, under the aurora, in a world that shouldn't exist, it felt like the first. Jenny, he said, his voice rough, I need to tell you everything. She nodded, her eyes steady. Then tell me. So he did. About the job, the portal, the day Santa hired him with a single question. About the reindeer who thought he was a dating guru, the elves who staged flash dances, the gingerbread union strikes. About the nights he'd sat alone in his apartment, wanting to call her, wanting to explain, but terrified of what it would cost. Jenny listened, silent, her breath curling in the cold. When he finished, the weight lifted from his chest like a storm breaking. I should have told you sooner, Mike said softly. I just didn't know if you'd believe me. Jenny's lips curved in a wry smile. Mike, I'm standing in a magical village under a sky that looks like a painting. Belief isn't the problem. He laughed, shaky, relieved, and then her smile faded, replaced by something deeper. The problem, she said quietly, is trust. His heart clenched. I know. You kept this from me for 2 years, she said, her voice gentle but firm. And I get why. I do. But trust matters. Mike swallowed hard. I want to earn it back. Jenny studied him for a long moment, the aurora painting her face in hues of green and gold. Then she stepped closer, her breath mingling with his. You already started, she whispered. And then, finally, blessedly, she kissed him. It wasn't a movie kiss. It wasn't fireworks or fanfare. It was soft, slow, and real, tasting of snow and peppermint and years of words left unsaid. Mike cupped her face, his heart pounding like sleigh bells, and for the first time in forever, he felt whole. When they broke apart, Jenny rested her forehead against his. Mistletoe works wonders, she murmured. Mike laughed, breathless. Don't tell Rudolph. He'll never shut up. Jenny smiled, and in that moment, Mike knew. This wasn't just magic. This was home. Chapter 11. Home for Christmas. The portal shimmered like liquid glass as Mike touched the snow globe, Jenny's hand clasped firmly in his. In a blink, the North Pole vanished, and the familiar warmth of his apartment wrapped around them. The hum of the heater, the faint scent of cinnamon from Jenny's candle earlier. It all felt startlingly ordinary after a world of singing wreaths and aurora skies. Josh tumbled onto the rug with a squeal, still sparkling faintly from his glitter mishap. Mommy, Daddy, that was the best day ever. Jenny laughed, scooping him up and pressing a kiss to his forehead. I think you might be right. Mike stood behind her, watching them with a heart so full it almost hurt. For years, he'd lived in 2 worlds, one magical, one mundane, and tonight, for the first time, they'd collided. And somehow, instead of shattering, they'd fit. Jenny turned, her eyes meeting his. There was no fear now, no disbelief, just something warm and steady that made his breath catch. So, she said softly, Christmas Eve dinner. My mom's still expecting us. Mike blinked. Us. Jenny's smile curved, slow and sure. You didn't think you were getting out of it, did you? He laughed, the sound rough with relief. I didn't want to. Good, she said, her voice gentle but firm. Because Josh deserves to have you there. And so do I. Mike swallowed hard, emotion clawing at his throat. Jenny. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his. You've spent 2 years keeping magic a secret. Maybe it's time you let some of it in. He stared at her, the weight of her words sinking deep. And then he nodded because she was right. Magic wasn't just portals and reindeer and enchanted mistletoe. Magic was this, her, them, family. Josh wriggled between them, grinning like a sparkler. Can Rudolph come too? Jenny laughed, and Mike did too because of course Josh would ask that. Maybe next year, buddy, Mike said, ruffling his hair. He's got a busy night. Josh's eyes lit up. Promise. Mike smiled, his gaze locking with Jenny's. Promise. Later, as Jenny gathered Josh's things and Mike slipped on his coat, he glanced at the snow globe tucked safely in the closet. For years, it had been a symbol of distance, a secret that kept him apart. Tonight, it felt like something else entirely. A bridge. And as he followed Jenny and Josh out into the crisp December night, Mike knew this Christmas wasn't just another holiday. It was the start of something new, something lasting, something worth every impossible risk. Chapter 12. Snow Globe Secrets. Christmas morning unfurled like a ribbon of gold across the frosted windows of Jenny's family home. The scent of cinnamon rolls and fresh pine filled the air, mingling with laughter that spilled from every corner. Wrapping paper lay scattered like confetti, and the tree glittered with ornaments that caught the sunlight in tiny bursts of color. Mike sat on the couch, a steaming mug of coffee warming his hands, watching Josh tear into his last present with the kind of joy that made the world feel new. His son's cheeks were pink, his hair still dusted with flecks of glitter from last night's North Pole escapade, a stubborn sparkle that refused to wash out, like magic clinging to reality. Jenny perched beside Mike, her shoulder brushing his, her sweater soft against his arm. She smelled faintly of vanilla and peppermint, and when she laughed at Josh's triumphant shout, "It's a train! A rail train!" Mike felt something settle deep in his chest. Peace. Belonging. Home. Josh bounded over, clutching the toy train like treasure. Daddy. Mommy. Guess what? Mike grinned. What, champ? Josh leaned in, eyes wide with conspiratorial glee. Next year, Rudolph's coming to Christmas. He promised. Jenny laughed, shaking her head. Did he now? Josh nodded solemnly, lowering his voice like he was sharing state secrets. And he said he's bringing mistletoe. Lots of it. Mike choked on his coffee. Jenny's laughter rang out, bright and unrestrained, and Mike couldn't help but join in. Because of course Rudolph would say that. Of course he would. Josh scampered off to show his new train to Grandma, leaving Mike and Jenny in a pocket of quiet amid the holiday chaos. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the room. Outside, snowflakes drifted lazily past the window, painting the world in white. Jenny turned to Mike, her eyes shining with something that made his breath catch. You know, she murmured, I think this might be the best Christmas we've ever had. Mike reached for her hand, his fingers curling around hers. It's the start of something better, he said softly. Her smile deepened, and in that moment, Mike knew. This wasn't just magic. This was everything he'd ever wanted. Later, as Jenny gathered Josh's things and Mike slipped on his coat, he glanced toward the tree and froze. Beneath the lowest branch, half hidden by the folds of the tree skirt, sat the snow globe. Its glass shimmered faintly, flakes swirling in a slow, hypnotic dance. Josh crouched beside it, his small fingers tracing the curve of the globe, his voice a whisper meant only for himself. Next year. Mike's chest tightened. He caught Jenny's gaze across the room, and they shared a smile soft, knowing, full of promises neither had spoken aloud. Because some secrets weren't meant to stay hidden forever. Some were meant to sparkle, like snowflakes, like laughter, like love. And as Mike followed Jenny and Josh out into the crisp December morning, the world felt bigger, brighter, and infinitely more magical. Not because of portals or reindeer or enchanted mistletoe, but because of the family walking beside him.